what happens when we decide to trust the process. And that's what I want to talk to you about tonight. That here's what I know, that anything in life that's worth pursuing, anything that's worthwhile, that it's going to require you going through a process. That if right now you're trying to get out of debt, that's going to take a process. If right now you're trying to start your own business or you're trying to take your business to the next level, that it's going to take a process. If you're one of those individuals that as you're going through life right now, that you're struggling and you're trying to figure out how it is that you're going to pursue your goals and your dreams, understand that it's going to require a process. But here's what I know, that oftentimes, that unfortunately we don't accomplish our goals and our dreams, that the things that we're pursuing don't come to fruition. Why? Because we don't trust the process. And the moment we find ourselves in a situation in which we encounter a difficulty, the moment that we find ourselves in a situation where maybe perhaps we're not getting the results as fast as we anticipated, we begin to retreat. We begin to second guess ourselves. And the worst part is, for many of us, that we quit. We give up. And even more worse and more difficult than that are the times when we find ourselves in a situation and we want to move forward, but we find ourselves in the process of analysis paralysis because we're not willing to trust the process, because we want to have it all figured out. And unfortunately, you'll never have it all figured out. You're not going to know every single step. You're not going to know everything that's required, but what we have to be willing to do is trust the process. And so I want you to think about your life right now. I want you to think about a dream, something that you've been looking to accomplish, something that you've been wanting to do and that you've been meaning to do. And you know in your heart that maybe perhaps you've been intimidated by the process, that you know in your heart that now that maybe perhaps you've retreated because you found yourself in some unforeseen circumstances. You got hit with something that you didn't anticipate, or maybe perhaps as you've been going through this journey, this process, you thought that you'd have greater results by now. You thought on your timeline that you'd be further along, and because of the fact that you're not where you want to be, you find yourself judging the process. Because of the fact that it's more difficult than you anticipated, you find yourself second guessing and wanting to retreat. And what I'm inviting you to do tonight is to do what? To trust the process. And as I look at my life and I start to reflect and I think about where a very significant part of my journey began. And as most of you know, I toiled and I went back and forth with the idea, with just the idea of leaving my career in corporate America, leaving my guaranteed paycheck every 2 weeks, leaving everything that I knew, that I had prepared for, that I studied for, studying for accounting, getting my master's degree, preparing and practicing for the CPA exam and passing the CPA exam and working for one of the largest professional service firms in the world. And I remember just toying with the idea, the thought, entertaining it of what if? What if I were to start this process of walking away from everything that was certain to me to attempting to becoming an entrepreneur, to going after and trying to pursue my goals and my dreams. And I remember being at that place in which I was entertaining the idea. And finally, in December of 2004, it was the beginning of the process for me when I walked into the office of Tammy Klein and I put in my letter of resignation only a couple weeks after being promoted. And here I was about to start this journey. I had taken a bold step, left a certain paycheck for uncertainty. And I remember looking at this new journey that was going to take place and thinking, and I started to judge the process, and I started asking myself, well, how am I going to make things happen now? I no longer have a consistent paycheck that's coming in every 2 weeks. How am I going to make this reality really come true? And I remember just looking and seeking opportunities. And as some of you know, one of the very first opportunities that I had was a close family friend that told me about an extraordinary business opportunity in Costa Rica. And unfortunately, things went terribly wrong. And I remember I remember when I came to the realization I had lost about 80% of everything I had saved up. I invested about $40,000, and that was the part that I can honestly say that I understand that when I say trust the process, I understand that it's not easy, because that was the moment, that was the part right there when I lost that money. That was the part where I started to judge the process, where I started to have second thoughts. That was the time that I was considering going back and asking for my job back. That was the time that I started beating myself up and saying to myself, Andy, what were you thinking? I mean, did you not know that you couldn't make that kind of investment on your very first investment? Did you think things were going to work out? And that was the part in which I had to find myself battling with not retreating, find myself battling with not giving up. And so what I came to a realization of, and I can say this now because now that I can look back, and I'm so grateful, I'm so thankful that I didn't retreat. I'm so grateful and I'm so thankful that I didn't go back and ask for my job back. I'm so grateful and I'm so thankful that I had the courage to keep pushing forward. That now, as I look back at that situation, I realized that it was only part of the process. That I realized that situation was necessary in order for me to understand what it takes in order to become a businessman. It was necessary for me to understand what it takes in order to take a loss and be able to keep pushing forward. It was necessary for me to understand that sometimes things aren't always going to work out the way that you want them to. It was necessary for me to understand that I could still have success even without having that type of resources available for me. That it was necessary for me to understand that it was all part of the process. And so right now I want you to think about something that maybe perhaps you're dealing with, a challenge, an unforeseen circumstance. Maybe somebody that you were counting on has let you down. Maybe perhaps you're incurring a unexpected large expense, something that you didn't anticipate. Or maybe right now, as you look at this thing that you're looking to accomplish, you're looking at, and as you were sitting down and you were formulating your game plan, you didn't know that you're going to have these unanticipated hits. You didn't know that you were going to have these unanticipated setbacks, that you didn't know that it was going to be this difficult. You didn't know that it was going to take this much time. And maybe as you look at it, you've been judging the process. That you've been thinking about retreating. That you've been saying to yourself that maybe this isn't going to work out. And what you're forgetting to do is to trust the process. What you're forgetting to realize is that everything that you're going through at this moment, everything that you will endure, is only to prepare you for this thing that you're looking to accomplish. That it's necessary that when you say that you want to become this amazing businesswoman or this businessman, it's necessary that you understand what it's like to have to maintain during difficult times, that it's necessary that you understand what it means to do more with less, that it's necessary that you understand on how to be creative and tap into different resources, that it's necessary for you to understand alternative routes in order for you to get to the same conclusion, in order for you to create the same results, that it's necessary for you to understand that once you decide to pursue your goals and your dreams, that some things are going to happen, some things that you didn't anticipate. And it's necessary for you to understand that when these things happen, that the key is to find the lesson. The key is to understand that this particular situation, this thing that you're enduring, that it's happening for a reason. That it's in that moment that you're going to grow. It's in that moment that you're going to stretch. It's in that moment that you're going to discover some things about yourself that you didn't know. And that's why Martin Luther King said that the true character of a man or woman is discovered not during the times of victory, no, during times of challenge, during times of great obstacles, during times in the process in which you get hit by the blind side, the times in the process when the funds get low, the times in the process when you're not finding the results that you want as soon as you want them to. Those are the times. You got to dig deep. Those are the times that you start learning some things about yourself. Yeah, those are the times that you've got to learn to accept the process. And so what I've learned is that it's all part of the process. And oftentimes we avoid the process. We avoid the difficulties. We avoid the challenges because we don't want to face that part of the process. And we don't trust that we're going to make it through, that we don't trust that this is required in order for us to become the person that we need to be for whatever it is that we're pursuing to come to life. And in the midst of trying to avoid the circumstances, in the midst of trying to avoid the struggle, in the midst of trying to avoid this thing that we need to overcome, that we also avoid our destiny, that we also avoid this goal, this dream that we have, that we also avoid writing this book, that we avoid getting on stage and delivering our speech, that we avoid finally getting out of debt, that we avoid going back to school and getting that degree, that we avoid taking our lives to the next level, that when we avoid the process, instead of trusting the process and pushing through, trusting the process and accepting the difficult moments and understanding that it's part of the journey, ultimately, we find ourselves being sidetracked. We find ourselves missing out on that thing that's specifically for us. And I remember when I was first establishing my brand as a speaker. This was a couple years back. And I remember after having my website up and going out and giving some speeches and not as consistent as I wanted to. And I remember looking around at some of the speakers that were most influential. And I was looking at how they all had like a signature tagline, something that they were known for, something that people associated with them with. And I thought about my mentor, Les Brown, and anybody who has been exposed to Les Brown, they know the term, you got to be hungry. They hear that and they think of Les Brown. And I thought about Zig Ziglar, and I said, man, everybody who thinks about Zig Ziglar, they know that Zig Ziglar is known for telling you, see you at the top, because it's the bottom that's crowded. And so when you think of see you at the top, you think of Zig Ziglar. When you think of you got to be hungry, you think about Les Brown. When you think about unleash the power within, you think about Tony Robbins. And then I said, well, what is it that they think about when they think about Andy Henriquez? And so I was frustrated because I didn't know what my tagline was going to be. I didn't know exactly what it is that was going to be my signature thing, that thing that people would know me for, that thing that when you say it, they knew it was Andy Henriquez. And I remember sitting down on the table with a pen and a paper, and I started writing things down. And sure, I wrote some things down that sounded good, but it didn't resonate with my heart. I wrote some things down that I could say eloquently, but at the same time, it wasn't who I was. And so I was trying to manufacture the process. I wasn't willing to trust the process. I didn't understand that as long as I was willing to continue to put in the work, as long as I was willing to continue to work on my craft, as long as I was willing to continue to consistently do all the things that was required of me, that eventually that thing that I'd be known for, that thing that would be my tagline, that thing would eventually show up. And so I remember being frustrated and not knowing exactly what my tagline was going to be. And yeah, I was getting compliments when I was going out and speaking, and people were saying stuff, but I said, yet and still, but what are they going to remember me for? What are they going to remember me for? And then one day, as I continued to just work on my craft, as I continued to go through the process of listening to the books and listening to the CDs and going to workshops and seminars and continuing to go to my my speaker trainings and continuing to work on the stories and identifying the stories in my life that I could share and identify the most impactful stories and I found myself in Atlanta, and I was speaking at the Marquee downtown Atlanta, and I was speaking in front of a couple of hundred people, and I was in the process of giving what would now be my signature story, the story about my mom, the story about my mom coming here to this country with limited resources and finding herself in a situation in which most people would retreat, and a situation in most people would have given up, and my mom being willing to move forward. And I was delivering this speech, and as I was delivering the speech, there was a climatic moment in the speech, and I was there talking to the audience, and there's a scene for most of you who've heard the story in which my mom is there, and she's bidding on a property, and there's a climatic part in which she wins the bid. And I remember standing on the stage and impulsively, without being scripted, without ever saying it before, I was delivering the speech, and I said, "Sold to the woman who was willing to show up." And I said, "Ladies and gentlemen, you got to show up for your life. In spite of your circumstances, you got to show up in spite of what's going on in your bank account. You got to show up in spite of that conversation going on in your mind. You've got to show up even when people around you are trying to talk you out of it. You've got to show up even after failing over and over again. You've got to show up for your life, ladies and gentlemen, because if you don't, nobody else will." And I remember getting off that stage and thinking nothing of it. And then I saw people lining up to come speak to me. And one after one, they were coming, and I kept hearing the same comment. They said, "Oh, man, I really enjoyed your talk, Andy. I really enjoyed it." I said, "Well, what did you enjoy?" Well, they said, "The part about showing up." They said, "When I heard your mom's story, I'm going to show up. I'm going to start to show up for my life." Somebody else said, "I just want to show up. You've inspired me to show up." Somebody else said, "Sir, you showed up and you showed out." And they said, "Hey, I'm going to start showing up for my life. If I don't, nobody else will." And I remember being on the airplane flying back, and I was like, I sat there, and I remember sitting down with a piece of paper and a pen and so frustrated because I couldn't come up with my tagline. I couldn't come up with what my thing was going to be. And I realized that all I had to do was trust the process. And so maybe right now there's something that you're pursuing, that there's something that you want. You want this thing bad, and you're feeling frustrated because the more you want it, the more it seems to elude you. You want to lose this weight, and every time you attempt to lose this weight, for some reason, maybe you have little spurts of losing the weight, and then for some reason you gain it all back, or you want this business to go to the next level. You're working hard. You're putting in the phone calls. You're speaking to people. You're talking to people. You're making presentations, and it seems like the more you work, the harder you try. You're just not seeing the results that you want, or maybe right now you've been trying to pursue this goal, this dream that you have, and you're putting in the time, you're putting in the effort, but it's seeming more like a hobby than a dream, because you're not able to generate income doing it right now. It's eluding you. You're trying to fabricate this thing. You're trying to make it happen. What I want to remind you is this: you got to trust the process, and know that whatever it is that you're seeking, that it's also seeking you. You got to trust the process and know that what Tracy McMillan said is absolutely right, that everything works out in the end. And if it hasn't worked out yet, then it's not the end. You've got to trust the process and know and understand that when it was written, that says that all things work together for the good, for those who love him and are called according to a purpose. You've got to trust the process and know that things are going to work out. You got to trust the process and know that you can handle this. You got to trust the process and know that eventually this thing is going to work out in your favor. And so the question is, what do you got to do when you're trying to trust the process? Well, what do I do, Andy, when I'm trying to make this thing happen? And what I realize is the first step when you're trying to make this thing happen is you've got to be willing to number one, you've got to accept the process. You got to accept it and understand that there's no shortcuts in life. That anything that's worth pursuing is going to require some hard work. Anything that is worth pursuing is going to require you going through something. That anything that is worth pursuing is going to require that you put in some time and some effort. Anything that is worth pursuing is going to require you to die to who you are now, to give birth to the person that you're going to become. Anything that is worth you pursuing is going to require you to engage and immerse yourself in a process of personal development, of discovering some things about yourself. If it's worth it, it's going to require that you go through the process. So accept that fact. And once you accept the process, the second thing that you've got to realize is this, that every process is going to involve some obstacles. Every process is going to require that you go through some challenges. And those challenges are there. They're not there in order for you to quit. They're not there in order for you to retreat. No, they're there in order for you to grow, in order for you to stretch, in order for you to discover some things about yourself that you haven't discovered yet. They're there in order to prepare you for that thing that you're pursuing. They're there in order to make sure that you understand what it takes in order for you to become this businessman or this businesswoman. They're there in order for you to be able to develop and go through experiences so that you can share with these audiences, that you'll be able to relate with them, that you'll be able to share some things that you've gone through, that maybe that they'll be able to know that, hey, you know what, that when this man or this woman is standing before me and they're delivering this speech, I got a way to connect with them because they've been through some stuff. They've been through some challenges like me, and they found a way to keep pushing forward. That this thing that you're encountering right now, that this obstacle that you have to go around, that you have to go through, that the only reason why it's there is to prepare you for such a time as this. That you'll look back at some point in the process and you'll realize that it was necessary. And then ultimately, once you've accepted the process, and once you're willing to embrace the challenges and not avoid them, once you're willing to stretch yourself and grow, finally, you've got to commit to finish it. Yeah. And understanding that we don't know how long it's going to take, but we got to make the commitment that we're going to finish. That it may mean another week. It may even mean another month. It may mean another year. It may mean another 5 years. Or it may even mean a lifetime. But you got to commit yourself to finishing the process. Because ultimately, that's what it's about in life. So right now, as you look at your life, and as you think about this thing that you want, this thing that you've been wanting to pursue, that maybe you haven't acted on it, or maybe you have and you're not seeing the results that you want, and you've been getting frustrated and you've been considering retreating, you've been considering giving up. I want to remind you tonight that you got to trust the process. Understand that that's necessary for this thing to happen. Accept that this is part of the journey. Grow through the difficulties and the challenges. And commit yourself to finishing the process. This has been Andy Henriquez, and I want to remind you to always show up for your life. Because if you don't, ladies and gentlemen, no one else will.